Right, hello there. Today we are going to do some extras on our witch's cooking pot. And that might include adding some smoke or a effect that looks like smoke or steam, and then maybe doing some texture painting. So we might do that first. I'm not quite sure yet, but the texture painting in particular can be done inside Blender. So we'll take a look at using the texture painting tools for that. But before we do all of that, what we need to do, or what I'll do here, is revert our cooking pot back into an accessory, a standard accessory item. So because we adjusted the pot to make our poses, we can use this version and re-import that back into the accessory file, and then just make some adjustments and get that set up as an accessory. So we'll set it up, export it, and just get it into IMVU to test that it's working, and then what we can do is do the painting and the various other bits and pieces. So let's do that. So what we want is, let's open another instance of Blender. So we want the accessory files, which are accessory files. So we want the starter files. We want to grab the accessory file. So there are two, obviously female or male, it doesn't really matter. So female accessory, drag and drop. And of course we have to update the scene. So 100 to match the scaling to IMVU. And double check the camera distance. Oops, where did that go? View, oh, that's okay. So this is the accessory file. If you've not seen this before, we were using this in the first video. So each one of these armatures represents the bone of the armature that you attach your mesh to. So what we're going to do is append the pot back into the accessory file. So we need to make sure that we know what the name of the mesh is. So that is there, pot.mesh, that's what we called the object. So what we can do, accessory file, so file, append, need to find the file that we are wanting to use. So we want the latest, which is 18. So we select it, and when we're appending, as we mentioned before, the blend files, .blend files, they act as zip archives, so we can drill down into them as if they were directories or folders. So double click, and we want the object folder, double click, and then we need to find our pot. Pot.mesh, there it is. So select and then just append, and there is our pot. So we should be able to using the rotate, so we're in object properties, and we can use the rotation values, because the advantage of using FBX is that we can rotate the object without necessarily needing to fix it as we used to have to do. So apply rotation scale. So we don't need to do that anymore. So what we can do, 0, 0, 0. And then we can position this. We'll have to go into edit mode for that, I think. Yes, because don't know how visible this is, but we've got the origin point there. So these coordinates, so location and rotation, they are all relative to whatever the origin point is doing. So although we can rotate it, because we didn't fix its position, or we didn't fix its rotation, we can re-center or re-zero its rotation so it's pointing upwards the way that it currently is. But with the location, if we zero this, well, let's do it. So if we zero this, this is what will happen. It sinks below the ground. So we can either do that and then edit mode, mesh, whoops, select all, and then reposition. So make sure we're in global orientation, we are, and then just view, viewpoint, front, and just drag and pull that up. We can do that, or let's just undo all of that. We can just roughly position it in object mode. So view, viewpoint, front. So either or, doesn't really matter. What we should end up with, so that's the shortcut key, which is numpad 5. It toggles perspective. But it basically means that we just end up with the object positioned where it needs to be, sat on the ground. So let's make this an accessory. Oh, let's save the file before we do anything. So save as, and this is (19). Right, so just move this to one side. We'll make it an accessory that will attach to the avatar's root bone. So basically we could use this as an accessory in the same way that we use we have the avatar wearing rings, bracelets, all sorts of things. It'll load in at the avatar's feet, a little bit like a pet actually. So we need to make some adjustments to it as well, but for now let's move it a little bit forward. So accessory, select the mesh. We want to be in object data properties, attachment root. So we've already got our vertex group, that's the word I was looking for, even though it's there. We've got our vertex group set up for its use previously, but what we need to do, modifiers, we need to swap the armature that this is associated with. So we have to clear the object. So we click on the little not plus, the X. That clears that, we get the eyedropper appearing again. Click on that, and then what we want to do is click on the female master root. That appears as our object now, so that's now controlling the pot. And we can test this again as we did previously. So switch to pose mode when the armature is selected. Select a bone. So it's not that's attachment node. So there are two bones. We want attachment root. So there it is. That's attachment root. So that's now controlling that. So we could do a, let's exit back into object mode. We could probably do a quick test to make sure that this works. So let's just save this, save as 20. So select the mesh, then the armature, file, export, FBX. So we want selected objects. Everything else is okay. Geometry, that's all right. Armature, always disable add leaf bones. We have no animation, so disable that. The name is okay. File location, that's fine. Export. It's IMVU. Create mode. Derive, new product. Female accessory, although the male accessory will work just as well. Go. So we're going to replace the glasses. FBX import, load FBX. So where is our pot? Number 20. Open. So again, we get two options. What we want is the one with two bones and one mesh. So that's attachment root. It's got our mesh. Configure. So it's imported it. And again, for female accessories, the mesh ID is 2. For male accessories, it's 0. So change the scale, 0.01. Got our materials, import, override errors, that's okay. So it's appeared attached to the head. So what we want to do is config, change this to female 03 master root. And there is our pot. So this will move, as it's an accessory, this will move. Where's my arrow pointy thing? Got a pointy marker. Somewhere. Oh, that's Aislin's room. Very nice room. Where's the pointy marker gone? That's weird. It's not listing all the products. Don't you just hate it when that happens? Okay, well, let's just use a stack of books. So there's our stack of books. This is just a positional thing so we can see. So as the avatar moves around, because it's an accessory, the pot moves with the avatar. So we know that works. Right. So let's do some adjustments to the mesh. Edit mode. We've got our vertex groups, and this is why the vertex groups come in handy that we set up previously, because we can now select the top and we can now move that because it's now selected that as a group. Oops, we've got the croc still selected, so make sure none is selected first and then the top. So now we can just move that. So let's have it resting on one of the feet. Whoops, like so. Right, so that's the lid. So we now have to correct the croc because we tilted that. And we made some adjustments to the mesh itself. So we may have to adjust the positions of some of the vertexes so that they're not poking through the mesh, because remember this is just single-sided as an optimization. We didn't want to make the mesh too thick, so we're in global orientation, so the vertices are being manipulated relative to the grid. So that's okay, that's that. Let's just line the vertices up a little better. So what we're doing here is using, so the move widget has two components to it, well, three components to it. We've got the directional axes, so that's the red green handles, and then we've got these little square paddles as well as the white loop. And if we click drag on the paddles, it manipulates the vertex in the orientation the paddle or the plane is facing. So this blue one, it's a shame we can't get closer to it because it's obviously the size is relative to the screen, but it essentially allows us to manipulate on two axes. The green one goes up, and then the red one goes up and side to side relative to what we're doing. Right, so that's that done. Object mode. So we know that works. So we've got that exported. So we know that the adjustments that we're making now have no effect on this appearing in IMVU. So next, let's do a bit of texture painting. So let's save this, save as 21. So you'll need to make sure that the object is UV mapped for this. So we'll do some basic texture painting. So switch to texture painting workspace. And we'll get this. And of course, because it's a new layout, it will remember. Well, it won't remember. It'll be defaulting to Blender's defaults. So we have to reset the view so that we match the scale, just so that everything matches up. $501. So there's our pot. Make sure that we've got that selected. Yep. Texture paint. We want to select the material that we're going to paint, and then the image that we're going to paint over. So select the browser. Let's do the pot map. So that's what we're going to paint over. Make sure that that's selected. So we've got all our tools that we can use. And we can then just select a color. So we can do that in the, don't know what that's called, texture color preview lozenge, or we can set the color in here. RGB. Let's go for a grey. Just do a classic pot. Strength 1, and let's just paint over the entire thing. So left click drag, and we can see it's painting over the entire thing. So let's do the legs or the feet. That's the top. Then the feet. And the underside. So that's our base color. And we can leave this. We can also paint actually on the mesh itself. Pot map. So let's do like that, so we can paint directly on the object itself. Let's just hide the wireframe for the moment. Viewport display. That's just so that we can see. And we can also paint on multiple objects. But for the feet, remember that because they are all the same, it means that the texture that's, or the way that the texture is painted applies to all of them. Put dark shadow under there. So this is going to be relatively rough. Let's get this soot. And one thing to know about this is that the size of the brush, although it's set to 50 pixels at the moment, the actual size that's painted, particularly in the 3D view, is relative to how zoomed in you are to the scene. So if we zoom right in, we're almost at the pixel level. So this is the same brush. So we've got 3 different strokes from the same brush. Let's make this quite sooty. And then what we can do is smudge. So we've got our tools, as we have with the 3D editor, we've got different tools. So draw, which is what we're using, soften, so if we enable that, it just takes the hard edge, although it's not usually quite as visible, it just takes the hard edge of the things that we paint. So it's essentially a sort of selective blurring. We've got smudge, and again the degree to which it smudges, which is the tool that we actually want to use, the degree to which it smudges is dependent on how close you are to the object. Let's just hide the text for the moment, so blah de blah text, so we can see what we're doing. Then there's stamp or clone, fill, and then mask. What's that one? Annotate. Oh, so we can scribble on screen. looking very sooty. So as with a lot of these processes, it's just repetitive. Let's hide the skeletons. So then we can smudge on the image or on the mesh. So we're doing the handle, so we can see how that's updating this handle as we paint. Or smudge. Hide the avatar. Whoops. Oh, so we have to create our group again. Reorganize the scene so that we can hide one. New collection. Cook pot. Just we are in object mode. So where's the cook pot gone? There's the pot. Drop that into there. We can move that up to the top. Hide the avatar, which is now not in the way. Whoops. Where are our paint tools gone? Ah, that's weird. Paint tools have disappeared. Okay, so we'll have to carry on. That's weird. Yeah, the cursor's completely disappeared. No idea what's going on there. Because we need to yeah, that's weird. Because one of the advantages of using texture paint is that we can smudge. So this is the edge of the UV map. And it's often tricky to paint across. So what we could do, although we can't do it now for some reason, is just paint across there. And smudge the colours. Let's do the feet. Oops. So we have to keep swapping back and forth between the images that we want to adjust. That's very weird where those, whoops, So getting somewhere, I think what we'll do is layout. And it's still in paint mode for some peculiar reason. Let's save those files, save as, and then reload the file. Because it shouldn't be doing this, but of course this is Blender we're talking about. Okay, so let's reload, see if that does anything. Oh, of course, we had to save the image because it's a temporary texture. And it's, oh well, Texture Paint's now active. That's very weird. Okay, so let's do that again. So select our object and the texture. And let's do that again. So I guess the lesson learned there is have your scene managed and sorted out before you actually start painting things. See, now it's switched to, oh, there we go, Texture Paint. That's very weird. Right, let's do that again. Yoink. There you are, you see, now we can do it. That's very weird. Bad Blender. Right, so, sooty black. And the brush, does it do this? No, when we're in the UV editor, how zoomed in we are to the image doesn't affect the brush stroke, but it does with our object when we're in object mode. So let's just get that. So that can be quite tricky to manage if you're zooming around the scene and find you're zooming further away from the object whilst you're painting some detail. You might end up inadvertently making your paint strokes smaller than you expected, or larger, depending on how zoomed in you are. Oh no, that needs to be black as well, because that's underneath. So what we want is so this is going to be tricky. It's making it worse. Do with a wireframe overlay. Where is that? We don't have one. So if we enable it in here, does that work? Nope. Does that work? Nope. Oh, well that did something. But now it's not painting. So it doesn't like... Oh no, it is working. Doesn't like you changing modes. Which is a bit weird. But we'll survive. Oh yeah, don't worry about modifiers and stuff. This is just basic painting at the moment. But it's not that that's the problem. It's the way that the tools are not being... So it's... I guess we can call this buggy. I don't know. So can we see this section here? This is where we are at. So we can see what's going on here. It's smudging the texture in the texture view, but it's not updating the 3D view, except when we do that. So might be because whoops. It might be because we're trying to paint, because we have to remember that's actually the inside of our mesh. So it can only paint from the outside of the mesh in. So that's on the blue, but not on the red, because that's the inside of the mesh. See, so it's scribbled all over the... So that means that if you have a structure like this, that you will have to that could be tricky to sort out actually. Let's get this sooty bottom sorted out. Because this is actually taking a bit longer than expected. Which is always the way. So what we might do is just do this to this point that we've got it at, and then go through the process of saving this which should be similar to creating our texture map that we used for creating the maps for painting over. Yeah, so it's the inside of the mesh. It doesn't like you painting on the inside of the mesh. But it does change whatever is underneath there. But let's get this into some semblance of a pot texture. So that's something that we'll have to watch out for when doing something that has the inside of the mesh showing. So I'll finish this off screen because it's taking quite a while to do. So what we need to do as well is because remember we filled those faces. But that's texture painting. So let's assume that that's fantastic and we've done it. Well, hey, there's our texture. So in the texture, the image editor, we have the image menu, and it now has the little star asterisk appended after it. That basically tells us that there is some information that's been created or generated that hasn't been saved. So to save this, what we want to do is click on that image and then save as. It opens up the file browser. So let's do pot map painted. We don't need any compression, so it's best to use a raw image format. So Targa Raw, TIFF or bitmap. File locator's okay, file name's okay. That's okay. Save. So what we could do, switch back to layout and object mode, unhide everything. Let's just save this. Save as 23. Let's double check that we have created an image. Accessories. Oh, there it is. Rather fine looking pot texture map. So that is the map. So let's export this again, because we made some adjustments to it. So pot, armature, file, export, FBX, selected objects, everything else is okay, geometry, that's okay, armature, always disable add leaf bones, bake animation, don't need that, file name's okay, export. So Blender, so let's create a new project so we have a comparison. Derive new project. Female accessory, go. Import the FBX. Load FBX. So that's 23. Where's 20? There's 23. Open. And again, attachment root, 2 bones or mesh. There's our pot. Scale 0.0.01. Mesh ID 2. It's got our materials. Import. Import changes. And then apply changes. Oh, and there's the pot texture. It's auto-magically assembled it. So then we have to go to attachment node and type female 03 master root. So it's all case sensitive. So uppercase F, uppercase M, and uppercase R. And there is our pot. So obviously we then just need to paint the rest of it to match. But, so that's the pot. So the extra bit, what if we wanted to add some steam to this? How would we do that? So we first need a steam texture. So we have to make one. So we can either do this in an image editor. Let's go with 256 by 128. Whoops, that's the wrong way around. One two eight by 256. There we go. So steam texture, relatively straightforward. Black. Whoops. And obviously this will differ depending on your image editor. Oops. What I want is my paintbrush. Where's the paintbrush? There it is. Smudge tool. Where's the smudge tool? What does that do? Not a lot. There we go. So this will need to be set up so that it tiles. So I'll just do this quickly so that we have something that we can work with. And you do want to make it, well, depending on what it is that you're actually working with, you do kind of want to make it a little wispy. So let's say that's going to be our steam texture. So let's save this, save as steam. Going to export this. PNG, blah 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 blah, export. So, how do we use this? Got our object, and all we need to do is add a plane. So mesh plane, that drops one in. Just do some basic positioning, so we want it upright more or less, and then just do some basic editing. So edit mode, so we can start changing the basic shape of it. Something like that. So that's what we start with, and then what we want to do, because what we don't want to do is just then UV map this so that the texture just tiles straight up. So to make this interesting, what we want is some loop cuts. So left click, drag slide, left click, drag slide, and then left click. So we're adding a couple of loop cuts, because what we can then do, edge select, select the loop, and then we want to do this. And twist it, get it out of shape. And for the top, we need the texture to disappear when it gets to the top. So what we want to do here is just scroll this, not scroll, scale it so that it diminishes. So what we end up with is this effect where the steam looks as though it looks, so we're giving it the appearance that it's disappearing when it's not. It's actually just scrolling off the edge of the So let's grab that, put that in the middle, grab that. Let's add another loop cut here. Rotate. Because what? Let's hide those text things again. Text info. Because what we can then do, so we'll just do the one for now. So that's our object. We need to make sure that it's smoothed. So shade smooth. So that's our weird shape that has no relation to anything. then need to assign a material to it, so we have to create one. So material, new, we'll call this Steam, and this has to be IMVU compatible, so we've already got one. How many have we got? So we've already got 3, so the next one is brackets, space, brackets 3, close brackets. Because what we'll end up doing is joining this all together. So that's our material. So shading, again we'll have to reset the view. So 100, view, sidebar, 2500. So that's our object. So we've got our basic material nodes. Let's preview that. To this we want to add image, image texture. Click open. Browse to our Steam texture, which is somewhere, there it is. So there's our Steam texture. Link color output, base color input, and there is the Steam texture, because this mesh, being a primitive, has a default UV map assigned to it. So we can adjust that, but so in what we can do next, add texture, image texture, and we can use the same image that we've just dropped in as an opacity map, and this replicates what IMVU uses. And if it's set up like this, so we click color output, drop that onto alpha input, so we'll see this, and then what we do in material properties, go down to settings, expand it, so let's click on the little triangle thing, and it's this setting that we want, blend mode. Change that to alpha blend or alpha hashed, and don't know how clearly that's coming through, but there is our Steam. So this is what we'll generally be seeing in IMVU, and then what we can do is play around with the UV mapping of this object. So select and adjust. Need to be careful not to go too close to the white bits. You don't want to accidentally actually snap. Don't want to accidentally so don't know how clearly that's coming across on the video. So we've got this little patch of white steam here, so we can change the size and position of that relative to the UVs by just playing around with the UV vertices. And what this means is that in IMVU, when we set the texture to scroll, what we'll see, so if we watch what happens in the preview on the 3D view, we'll end up with something that scrolls like that, and it'll disappear at the top, and that is a cheap way of doing steam effects. And obviously what you can then do is, once you've got one done, best way of doing this, so object mode, it's best to do this in object mode, because what you want to do is duplicate that object, duplicate object, and we can rotate that, change this, which then means, hang on a second, sidebar, which then means we can overlay this object over the top of the first one, and what we'll want to do using the same UV mapping, so we've got the same map, but the two of them together, when they are set up in IMVU to animate, will create a more three-dimensional steam effect. And obviously you don't need to just use two big ones like that. You can rescale this, or rescale them relative to each other. Make one slightly smaller so you have a dominant steam fighting for relevance with the other one. So let's just enable wireframe so we can see these, because they are tricky to see. So there are our steam objects. So let's duplicate that one, flip it around, move that to the other side of the pot, play around with that. Let's do the law of threes. So something like that. I don't know how easy this will be able to see this, but and then what you can also do is, once you've got these set up, is just offset the UV map so that you don't repeat the texture or the texture mapping on all three. So that basically means that you'll get a much more natural effect. So that would be how you would then, so let's do a quick export test of this. So let's save before we do that. Save as 24. We need to join all this together. Join. Mesh, armature, export FBX, 24. Yeah, it is very cool. It's a very cheap way of getting the steam or smoke effect. So selected objects, everything else is okay. Add leaf burns disable, no animation. So export number 24. So let's create another one. So we have our comparison, accessories, FBX import, load FBX. We want 24. Again, attachment route, 2 bones 1 mesh. FBX export. Mesh ID 2, again for female, 0 for male. Apply scale 0.01. So we've now got our extra material popping up. So import changes, apply changes, and there is our steam effect auto-assembled for us. So you might have to do a bit of fiddling to get that to work exactly how you might want it. So female 03 master route. So there's the steam. We want meshes, select our material, and we want scrolling for this. So let's just turn that on. Now which way is it? That way. So it's direction X, just do 0.5 and then 0.5, just so that we can see what it does. So 0. Right, so it's 0.5 for that one, 0 for that one. So there is our steam. But do note, we're dealing with transparencies. And we all know what happens when we use transparencies. We get some funny rendering issues while we're dealing with transparency that is layered. But that is our steam effect. I mean, if you wanted to go the nth degree, what you could do is set up each of these with their own steam material. So you would have steam 3, steam 4 and steam 5 in this particular instance. Export the whole lot out, and that would mean that your steam, each one of these would have its own material, which you could then set a different speed or direction, a different speed to, so that the big one is faster than the other two, which makes it much more interesting as an object. So that are our, those I should say, are our extras for our witch's cooking pot. So texture painting with Blender, as tricky as that can be sometimes because of we can't paint on the outside. No, we can't paint on the inside of our, on the red bits. So if you were doing something like this, where you had something that, so the lip that goes around the lid, the lip of the pot, it might be a case of having to do that in a way that, because the way that we made this, what we did was so that's the pot. What we did was bent the pot that way. So what it might mean doing is to create the lip and to make sure that you can texture paint, what it might mean is pot, bending the pot this way so that you're always facing outwards with your surfaces rather than outwards and then we're on the inside of the mesh if we do it this way. So that's something to consider, and this gives us our fake impression of thickness of the pot. So if we do it this way, it also then means that we might be able to extend that down to the level of the crock so that we can create an even better impression of thickness of our pot. So that's something to consider. But that is our pot. So we're basically done with this. All the sorts of things that you can do. So we've added custom poses. We've turned this into an accessory with poses that go a bit wonky because of IMVU. Then we've just got a standard. Where is that arrowy thing? Let's just drop the books in again. So the pot moves with the avatar. So that is our witch's cooking pot. Right, so I don't think, what's the date today? '27th, yeah. So I don't think we'll have time to do anything else for Halloween or Creatween. So that is Creatween 2020 done and dusted. So we made a couple of items. So for Creatween, at least, until next year, we shall see you anon. So thanks for lurking, lurkers. Thanks for chatting in the chat. Evgenia, or Evgenia, I guess that's how you pronounce that. And we shall see you on the next video. Right, bye for now.